Hello, everyone. It is so great to be with you today. I'm excited to be able to share some information with you about how to choose the best MBA program for you, because there's not just one best MBA program, but it's the best MBA program for you. And key to this conversation, I'm going to share um, an approach to take, sharing with you the idea of coming up with 7 or 8 decision factors that will help you as you work through this process. I'd like to just ask a couple of questions if I could. Could you let me know where you're logging in from today? Just type it right in the comments box. I'd love to see who's here and where are you joining from today. While you're typing that in, let me share a little bit of information about myself. My name, as I said, is Kelly Wilson, and I have spent over 23 years leading MBA admissions for both MBA and MS programs in the business schools. I joined Accepted as an admissions consultant last fall, and I'm thrilled to be able to work with candidates like you who are applying to business schools. Most recently, I was executive director for master's admissions at the Tepper School at Carnegie Mellon University for 10 years. Before that, I was at Georgetown, McDonough for 4 years, and before that at the University of Pittsburgh. So across that time, I have gotten a lot of experience that I want to share with you. I was, along with my team, able to review over 38,000 applications and trust that you'll benefit from that experience today. Okay, let's see some of the places you're logging in from. So I see Singapore, South Africa, welcome. If you're from India, type in the city that you're from because I see a number of Indian candidates here. It's always great to think about the city that you're coming from, as I've spent time in India and I really enjoyed it. I see folks here from the US, Latin America. If you're from the US, go ahead and type in your the state that you're coming from. Thank you, Calcutta, Bangalore, Gurgaon, sorry. And then our friend from Ghana, thank you for sharing that as well. So here's what I'd like to do today. I see Delhi too. One of my favorite visits was to Delhi. There's so much to see there. And I got to spend a little bit of extra time when I was traveling in Delhi. Okay, so what I'd like to do is just to go ahead and get started with the presentation. But what I want you to do is keep typing in questions in that comments box. And I'll try to work your questions in as I go along. If I can't fit it in until the end, I'll do my best to get to your question at some point during the presentation. But as a question comes up, go ahead and type that in. Let's make this interactive for sure. The other thing I wanted to just mention is as you're going through the session with me today, make sure that you like this presentation and be willing to share comments and engage. So looking forward to it. All right, so what I'm thinking about today is round one will soon be completely behind us. And we'll turn our focus to round two, which is 3.5 months away. So many of you joining are either just getting started or maybe you applied to round one. Let me know where you are in the comments box on your journey. Have you already applied to in round one? Is round two the first application attempt that you're making? Go ahead and let me know where you are in the process. Regardless of where you are, though, you want to consider how each school stacks up against what you're looking for, But I'm also going to help you understand then how do you take that group of schools and determine how your profile fits with their group. Um, so here a couple of folks applied in round one. Um, Others have applied in are waiting for round two, which is totally fine. Um, if you're applying in round two, you are doing a great job joining us today because I'm going to help you get started. Um, and so that's the first section we'll talk about is where do I start? Um, how does the school stack up? How do you stack up? And then I'll share some information about accepted and how my colleagues and I can help you navigate this whole process. So let's dive in and talk about where to start. Basically, there are two steps in the process, two main steps. I know that you might think I'm oversimplifying, but follow me and we're going to walk through. The first thing that I want you to think about is what do you want and need from your MBA experience? So as you're thinking about all of the MBA programs around the world that you could apply to, you certainly have ideas, or I'm going to actually help you to think through the ideas of what you want and need from your MBA experience. The second part of the process is to determine how competitive your profile is against that group of schools. And so let's go ahead and take a look at the idea of what you might want and need from your MBA experience. I offer here a suggestion of things to think about, but certainly you're not limited to only these ideas. But as you begin this process, you want to spend some time clarifying your career goals. You want to make sure that the schools on your list work with the companies you're targeting for your desired functional role post-MBA, your desired industry once you graduate. And so alignment with career goals is really the place that I would suggest you spend some time reflecting and thinking through what is it that you want to do post-MBA. The next component is pretty obvious as well. From an academic standpoint, what are you thinking about in terms of what you'd like the experience to be? Do you want your experience to be primarily case-based, or are you specifically interested in experiential learning aspects of the program? Is there a certain area of business that interests you as a particular focus? And is that going to be an area that every B school will offer? You want to make sure that you're identifying these things. So include that on the list of things you want from your experience. One of the really cool things about the MBA program experience is you get to practice leadership. As you're learning new skills, by being involved in student clubs and organizations, they are a great opportunity to take on leadership roles. Maybe you're interested in other extracurricular opportunities as well that focus on affinity groups. Think about what are those things that you want to do outside of the classroom. That's certainly part of the business school experience. For some of you, university or B school brand may be an important feature. Others may be more interested in what the day-to-day experience will be, whether the program is small or large. If you happen to be coming to the MBA program with a family or a spouse or a partner, what are the resources for those individuals as you navigate this step in your life together? And then are you targeting a specific geographic location? Are you wanting to study in Europe or the US? If it's the US, are you wanting to be on the East Coast or the West Coast? Do you want to be in a city, or are you thinking more of maybe a suburban or rural setting? All of these things are important for you to identify because after all, you're making an investment and you want that investment to be one that will pay off. Here's the thing. I'm offering you this group of decision factors as a starting point. So you're already thinking about another factor that you might add to this list. So, just again, I would encourage you to think about what you want and need from your MBA program experience. Once you have that done, the next step is to categorize each of those factors. So you can see here, there are 4 different categories that I want you to think about. What are the absolute must-haves? Mark those as essential. So without this particular factor, this is not a business school that I would select. Other factors may be important, but are not necessarily deal breakers. So you want to identify those as well. Some factors you'll determine are nice to have, and that's great. And that just is a value add if a school has that factor. After you create your list and you're going through this exercise, you might realize that one of the factors that you listed actually isn't really that important after all. And so you even want to identify those. Are you thinking about decision factors? Are any coming to your mind? Again, this is a personal decision, a personal experience, and the decision is one that you want to make based on your wants and your needs. So I always like to think about how to make this practical for candidates. And so, I suggest that you drop this into the spreadsheet. And so here you can see, this is not the general categories, but maybe a little bit more specific. So you can see here, specifically, I put a career in product management is essential, right? A city setting is nice to have. Like, I'd love to be in the city, but it's not essential. You can see other ones as well. And down here in the bottom, initially, as I was going through this process, I thought, you know what, I really need to be on the East Coast. Then as I was reflecting on it, I thought to myself, I don't really know that that's that important. I don't think it's actually important at all. It's really not important. So all you need to do is understand that this is a fluid list. You can see here that I crossed out the East Coast location set in stone, and over the coming weeks and months, something in your life might change that would then impact your decision factors. So you want to update it to reflect it. I just want to remind you, if you have any questions, put them in the chat box. I'll be happy in the comments box. I'll be happy to answer them as we go along. I trust that this has made sense so far. I will continue to talk about the next section. If you have questions on this section, just let me know. The next section is really talking about how the schools stack up. So let's take a look at determining how the schools stack up against your list of decision factors. You've gone through this process. You've identified the factors and how important they are. We've crossed out that one that ended up not being important. Before we talk about how you'll go about doing this, let's just take one more look at the spreadsheet that you can see on your screen. So we've sorted each category, as you recall, in terms of how important. So you now see the essential ones are at the top of your spreadsheet. Across the top, if you can see, I've got school 1, school 2, 3, 4, and 5. That number can be more than 5. As you're thinking about this process, I would suggest that you consider, 2 to 3 times the number of schools that you might ultimately want to apply to, because you're going to end up eliminating some schools through this process. And so as you're as you're thinking about this and as you put this structure together, and you're thinking about, okay, so how do I determine how a school stacks up? You likely have a group of schools that are on your radar based on preliminary research you've done, maybe conversations you've had with friends or family, um, reputation of the school. Uh, but you need to engage with these schools to learn more. Maybe you have attended an MBA fair. And if you have, you had an opportunity to get an impression of a school, and maybe that has led you to include that school on this list, and that's great. However, you want to continue to actively engage with schools on your consideration list. So you want to spend time with each of these schools, and the ways to do it are virtually, in person, and on campus. This is not an exhaustive list by far, but I wanted to give you an idea of different ways that you could interact or engage with schools in these three categories. Especially post-pandemic, schools have a robust set of virtual activities, online information sessions, live AMAs or Ask Me Anything sessions, as well as student blogs, content on the school's YouTube channel. You'll find lots of opportunities for engaging virtually. At this time of the year, especially, many schools are traveling to cities near you. This is kind of we're in the time frame where this is still actively happening. So if you have a chance to meet school representatives or alumni in person at MBA fairs or school hosted events, maybe even coffee chats with members of the admissions team, take advantage of that if they're coming to your area. And then if you are planning to travel to a business school, or if you live near a business school, consider visiting campus. If you have that opportunity, sit in on a class. You'll get the sense of what being an MBA student at that institution is like. Participate in a campus tour. The fall is when many schools host a variety of diversity events, whether it's Women's Visit Day, veterans events, even general diversity weekends. You'll have the opportunity to meet with current students, professors, and other members of the community. I think one of the positive things that came out of the pandemic is schools have maintained a very robust set of virtual activities. So, if you're kind of bummed because you're not able to travel to visit on campus, you might find schools will offer online class visits, or some of the events that I just talked about will have a virtual component to them. And so make sure that you're looking at the school's websites and finding out the different ways that you can engage with the schools. The final thing I want to just talk about is most top business schools have student ambassadors who are current students who've raised their hand and said, hey, I'll interact and engage with prospective students. And often you'll find a web page with their contact information on. Reach out to them. They are a wealth of knowledge. So you can often sort by industry or function or concentration or country where they're from to identify who you might want to connect with first. One of the things that I would caution is, and this happened, as I was working at business schools, sometimes candidates would send 5 or 6 emails, the same email to 5 or 6 people. And just to understand that ends up being something that is known among the students and often is shared with the admissions team. So while I know you want to engage with schools, just that little word of caution. Okay, so you have engaged with schools. You have had an opportunity to connect with current students, alumni. How do you put this all together? And how does this investment of your time benefit you? So let's take a look at this slide. So you'll see the spreadsheet that we created earlier is now filled out with how the different schools stack up against those decision factors. You can see that, school one, for instance, meets or exceeds the essential and important, except for that last important one. It falls short of your desire to have a small class size. Again, that's not a deal breaker, but it is important to you. And then you'll see the nice to have of having being in a city setting is another area they fall short on. So for each of the schools, you'll want to go through and just continue to update on each of your decision factors, where the school or how the school aligns with this. And one of the things that, as you're reaching out to schools, as you're interacting with current students or alumni, this also helps to shape the conversation you might have with them. Or maybe even a conversation you have with an admission officer. So this is helpful in a number of ways. Not only are you identifying and narrowing the list of schools where you'll apply, but you're also shaping the conversation that you might have with a given school. And then you can see here that school number 3 falls short on the very first item that's essential, which is, product management is the career path that you'd like to go into. And if a school isn't really working to place students, or to if their graduates aren't finding jobs in product management, that one you would want to strike that one from your list. And so you can see here, we've eliminated that particular school from this list. If you have any questions, again, there are a couple of questions here that are a little more general. I'll be happy to answer that at the end. And I want to just encourage you again, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments box. The next section is focused on how you stack up. So you've got your list of schools. You have done the hard work of engaging with schools and filling out your spreadsheet. The next thing you want to do is to think about, as an applicant, are you qualified and competitive? So those are the two things that that are helpful to help you determine where you stack up. So qualified means that your application meets the basic standards of a given program. Remember, though, you can be qualified and not be competitive. Competitive is a little bit more nuanced. It includes preferences and character of the program, commonality or distinctiveness of your background, and sometimes even things that you wouldn't initially think of, political or economic trends or events, as we saw in the not too distant past, may impact some of the opportunities here. So the two steps you want to think about is, am I qualified, and how competitive am I? Once that you've determined how the qualification and competitiveness, think about putting the schools into 3 buckets. One is a reasonable reach. And what that means is acceptance is not likely, but with a great application, it's within a reasonable reach. Some would argue that the top 10 business schools in the US are all reaches. The next category is the on par, or really the target schools. And The definition there is with a great application, you'll have a solid chance at acceptance. And then finally, your safety schools, you'll likely to be admitted if you present your case credibly. So those are the three different categories you want to think about in terms of how you stack up. And then as you're thinking about categorizing the schools. So as you're thinking about that, let me give you a little bit more information that will help you to determine where you might fit from a competitive standpoint as well as you're thinking about how to categorize those schools. So probably the easiest or most obvious, I should say, element to determine is the test and your academic background. So schools will have on their websites the average GMAT or GRE score and GPA ranges. They'll also have a middle 80%. And so as you compare your profile against the class, think about where do you fall against the middle 80% range? And then where do you fall relative to the average? If you're in an overpopulated group, you really want to be at the average or above. If you are qualified, you'll fit into the upper 2/3 of that range. To be competitive, you would be in the upper 1/3 of that range, somewhat competitive in the middle third, and if it's a reach, you're going to be in the lower third. From a work experience standpoint, the more competitive the program, the more important it is to have strong work experience with demonstrated impact, advancement, and leadership experience relative to your peers. So many top-tier programs turn down applicants with nearly perfect stats who lack the work experience and the leadership component. And then diversity is also important. Being in an overrepresented or underrepresented industry, demographic, or global region or country will affect your competitiveness. And the other thing to remember, this is an art, not a science. There's no formula I can give to you that you can plug in and come up with the answer of where you'll be admitted. And so you need to take some time to determine if a school is a reasonable reach, is a target or on par, or is a safety school. My colleagues and I at Accepted can help you think through this process. That's one of the things that we offer. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I know this can be a little bit overwhelming, although I've tried to break it down into steps that are easy to follow. Okay, so I have a question here. I think that fits in with the exact thing we're talking about. So Rudra is asking, is it okay to get dreamy and totally in love with one school, given it probably falls in reasonable reach, being a top 15B school, or should I be pragmatic and less biased towards one? This is a question that everyone on this session is probably wondering, and I'm glad you asked it. The reality is you want to think about how many schools you want to apply to. And it is okay to get dreamy. If there's a school that you think, gosh, if I just had a chance to go there, everything I've learned about it seems like it's a great fit for me. As I go through this exercise, it seems like it's a little bit of a reach. But I think if I put together a really strong application and tell my story in a way that's distinctive, I think I have a chance. I would say absolutely apply, because the reality is if you don't apply, you're not going to be admitted. The only way you're going to find out or even have the opportunity to go to that school is if you apply. So yes, it's okay to be dreamy, but I also think you want to be pragmatic. That's why there are 3 categories. And what you'll find is that you actually want to identify and apply to schools in each of those categories. At the end of the process of applying to B school, your goal is going to be to attend a business school program. And so you're going to want to actually identify schools in each of those areas and then think about where you're submitting your application. And I would encourage you to yes, go ahead and submit to reaches, but also to safety schools, as well as those that are in the sweet spot, that are on par. It's a good question, Rudra. Thank you very much for it. So I want to show you the spreadsheet one more time. And this is with it completed even one step further. So sections 1, 2, and 3, we've already talked about. And now in section 4, you can see that this candidate is qualified and somewhat competitive for school 1 and has categorized this as a reasonable reach. School 2 and school 5, they feel they're both qualified and competitive, and that is one of their on-par schools or a target school. And then school 4 is one where they feel qualified and competitive. The reality is, as they look at their stats and where their stats stack up against the average and the middle 80%, they believe if they submit a solid application that this is a school that they'll be admitted to. And so that's the safety school. And so this may be, if they decide to apply to 4 or 5 schools, this may be how they get that, or how they get to that list of schools. So you can see how this process flows through to the end of identifying schools that you'll want to apply to. Remember, when we started, I had talked about, yes, there are 5 schools on this list, but if you want to end up with 4 schools, you really want to look at least 8 schools, if not 12 schools, as you're thinking about how to identify these final categories of schools to which you will ultimately apply. Are there any questions? Rudra, you're very welcome. I hope this tool will be of benefit to you all. It's a very practical approach to what can seem like an overwhelming process. I know a couple of you, Pooja indicated that she's in the middle of GMAT prep. And so, one of the things that I would encourage you, Pooja, is as you're working through this process, you might want to parallel process some of this activity along with the GMAT prep. And I realized that was a question that was an answer in response to where are you in the process. I would like to wish you all the luck in getting your best score when you sit for the GMAT. And so that preparation is important. Let me see here. So Trivia asked a question, is COVID taken into consideration during the application process? For example, given if my application is delayed, so maybe if I'm reading this correctly, you may have a few more years of work experience than you would have initially. I think when you're applying to a program, if there's something that you want the school to be aware of or to consider, use the optional essay to talk about that. So I think as we move away from COVID, I think that's going to be something that you'll want to make sure that you're using that opportunity. It's not necessarily going to be on the top of their mind that's the reason why you're applying now instead of a few years ago. So anything that you want the admissions committee to consider, if there's not an opportunity for you to convey that in the application, otherwise, use that optional essay. So I think it's a great thing to talk about in the optional essay. I think you want to make sure that you're adding a couple of sentences. It doesn't have to be long. But please, please feel free to share that information, and maybe even in the interview if you have that opportunity. Andrew, thanks so much for coming. It's great to have you here as well. Oh, and Shibin has already separated the schools into 3 tiers, so good for you. I hope and trust that this information has been helpful for you. It can add maybe a little bit of structure to what you've done, is what you've conveyed. I mean, here's the reality is the investment that you make in time ahead of your application is going to pay off, because you're going to put together your application with confidence, because you've done work ahead of time to make sure that you have identified the schools that are the best fit for you. There's not one school that's going to be the best fit. There are going to be a number of schools that are a really good fit and can help you to achieve your goals. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Accepted and the work we do, but there are a couple of more questions, or at least one that just popped in that I want to get to. So Shibin is asking, would it be beneficial to do school visits to the States and attend in-person lessons? I have scheduled a few visits and meetings with seniors at different schools. Absolutely. If you can visit on campus, there's nothing better to get a sense of the culture of the experience than to do it firsthand. So if you have the opportunity to travel to schools, absolutely do it. Make sure, so most schools will have visit programs that they'll set up for you. But I would encourage you also to reach out to student ambassadors before you go. As you mentioned, you'll be connecting with some of your seniors while you're there. You want to make sure that you're making most of the time that you spend in a given at a given business school. So I would even encourage you, if there is something that you can attend that's outside of the classroom. So if it's a social event that's happening in the building or around campus, students will extend invitations and take them up on it if they're offering that to you. There's no better way than to have a firsthand experience in person. That said, if you can't do that, and if you're just not in a situation where you can do that, take advantage of these virtual opportunities. And if there's any way that that we can help you at Accepted, I'd like to just talk to you a little bit about the type of work that we do as we're working with candidates. You'll find from the MBA standpoint, we've got a team of admissions experts and industry insiders. And what I mean by that is we have been directors of admissions and have sat and led admissions committees at schools like Tuck, Georgetown, Michigan Ross, Yale, and others. And so we have over 70 years combined direct admissions committee expertise on our team of consultants. And we've been working with candidates since 1994. We do not have a canned approach to working with candidates. The approach is really based on you. It's not a cookie cutter approach. We are going to talk with you about your needs and how we can support you. That might mean that we work with you comprehensively on the entire application, or perhaps you just want help with your essays. You can purchase hourly services and focus on what you need the most help with. Maybe you want help with interview prep or whatever the component, you can use those hourly services to get our assistance. So you can either do it comprehensively where everything is included, or hourly and you specifically focus. Um, you can also take advantage of a number of resources on our website. So free advice and guidance. If you go to our website, you'll see a number of guides that we've written. There are opportunities for you to register or sign up for a 30-minute free consultation with members of our team. And you do that all through our website. And so we invite you to take advantage of that. It would be great to have an opportunity to talk with you a little bit more about your individual situation. And so, I'd love to be able to do that. You'll find a link on our website, and you'll see here that in the chat box there's a link as well. And so I just wanna say thank you. If you have additional questions, I'm happy to answer them. I think that I've gotten the questions that we had so far. Um, I wanna just thank you for joining today. Again, if you can like this session, if there's something that you connected with, please feel free, and I encourage you to click a like on the session. If you have additional things that we can help you with at Accepted, reach out, and we're happy to do that. I think we've got maybe any other questions. If not, again, I just want to say thank you very much and have a great rest of your day.